Hello, hello everyone. I know I am early, but I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and knock this out. I know I have not been consistent lately, and my apologies. I recently moved again, and I figured why not just go live early because I'm kind of getting tired, y'all. I did a lot of walking today, so I'm like sleepy. So if I sound like I'm about to like doze off, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to knock this out as much as I can. I guess I can move this to black. Okay, that's fine. We do that then. Delito, welcome in. So yeah, I know I scheduled this for like 12:30, so about like 25 minutes from now, but live with relatives. Gotta get in while it's quiet, okay? So let me just, give y'all the introduction. Delito, it's your girl Chiliona. Welcome back, memory keepers. Shoes off before you step in. This space is sacred. So, what I'm about to discuss isn't opinion. Right? This is not up for debate. And I want to talk about something that I see a lot in my comment section, and I feel like it needs to be addressed. Too many people mistake studies for real lineage work. But let's be clear, those things are not genealogy. They're outsourcing information that often doesn't even belong to them. And even then, who's to say it's the truth? What people fail to realize is that blood memory is traced in documents, in names, in stories carried through our lines. A scientific study can never replace that. Genealogy is about tracing the actual records of your family line, like birth certificates, census records, marriage records, land deeds. Studies, on the other hand, are built on theories, probabilities, and shifting categories. They don't trace your family, they generalize populations. That's the difference. So, before I go off on a tangent, I want to. I want to go over um, this comment I saw a while back, and I was like, you know what? This is the last straw. I need to make a video about this. I think this was under my Chris Brown is a reclassified Indian video. Let's see if it pops up for me. Okay, so I saw this comment, right? And it's something that I see often, sadly. And so I hate when people use scientific studies to justify claiming a landmass that they may or may not be indigenous to. So this person said, and I quote, there is evidence that Africans came to the Americas over 20,000 years ago. Research the bones of Lucia. Africans are the original people of all countries around the world. So there's like several things that are problematic with this. First of all, why are y'all Africanizing the original people of the Americas? And on top of that, her name is not even Lucia, it's Lucia. Y'all can't even get the names of these remains right. And let's be accurate here too, because I'm gonna go to click off this. And I want to show y'all the update on this because we actually went through this, but for some reason, people act like they're clueless about this. Because I went over this before. I went over this uh, a while back. Hold on, y'all. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so this article came out a while back, 2018, as y'all can see. Study dismantles theory of settlement of Americas, right? And this is talking about Lucia. It says her features were based on the theory by USP Professor Neves, according to which the people of Lucia, the set of fossils found in the 19th century, arrived before the ancestors of present-day indigenous people in Brazil. Okay, and it says the first migration wave, therefore, is believed to have had African or Australian traits. So they talk about how they came up with, you know, that conclusion, right? But what people fail to realize is that this has been updated. And yeah, we also on this channel talked about her new face. They gave her a new face. It was originally this one, but then they changed it to this one, which, by the way, she still doesn't look like modern day natives on these reservations. So I don't know why they felt the need to reconstruct her face. I mean, they didn't say why, but in my honest opinion, I think they changed her bust because so many people of the Black American demographic started claiming her. And it was like, oh no. But that's just my personal opinion, okay? Because they claim that they have updated research methods or whatever to come to the conclusion that they have now. So they said that the genetic data revealed that Lucia's people had strong ties with the Clovis culture, a lineage of human beings who went south from the north approximately 16,000 years back. So there's nothing in here about her being African. So I don't know why y'all are in here talking about she's African. Like, why are you lying? I don't understand. And this is why I don't fixate on scientific studies. Because when you come to my page, I'm like, oh, well, I can show you a study, or this is proof that Black people been in the Americas. Like that does not matter, you guys. It just does not matter. What matters is your genealogy. What matters is the history of your family. And this is what a lot of you guys keep trying to skip. People want to skip the genealogy process. They want to skip doing the actual research of their own family line. It's easy to go online and Google something about what these scientists say. Because at the end of the day, none of us are in these labs to say what, to, verify whether or not they're telling us the truth. And what I find quite fascinating is that people will sit here and talk about paper genocide, right? Racial Integrity Act of 1924. And yes, I'm going there because I hate it when y'all bring up that law, and that's the only law y'all know when it comes to paper genocide. When it comes to anything else, people don't know. They'd be like, oh, well, I only know Virginia Indians were reclassified on paper. Well, I don't know why you are in the Aboriginal American community then. I mean, why? If you're not going to learn more, then why are you here? Why even talk about paper genocide if you don't understand it? Because at the end of the day, the reclassification of our ancestors is shown in so many different ways. And it's quite crazy that people don't understand that reclassification isn't always like in your face, like with Walter Plecker. They calling it Clovis culture, but how do they know it's Clovis culture? They could have had a whole different name for themselves. Or how about Lucia? Okay, they call her Lucia, but she probably went by her own name. That's that's what many people are overlooking. And bringing up Lucia as proof of anything means nothing because the information about her and her people has been constantly shifting. Here's the reality: science will always revise itself because it runs on theories meant to be replaced. They even, like I mentioned before, reconstructed her face again. And with all their new technology, she still doesn't resemble modern day reservation natives. So, this last comment of someone commenting something like this, it was the last and final straw. Citing studies does not trace your family. It does not map your ancestors' footsteps. It does not restore what has been lost in your line. Leaning on what scientists say without doing the work yourself only keeps you at the surface while your lineage stays buried. From here on out, when someone drops this tired argument in my comments, I'm not engaging in a debate. I'm just going to post this video in the comments. I'm going to link it to ya and let it speak for itself. And I'm not being mean. I'm not being harsh. I have to be strict. I want to make myself clear. Studies do not equal lineage. They are temporary theories that shift with every new test or interpretation. They are not blood memory. A study might say some populations in the Americas carried a certain genetic marker. That does not tell you who your great grandmother was or how her name was recorded. A study might claim African presence in pre Columbian sites. However, that does not tell you which nation your ancestors belong to, nor how your line connects to that. Studies shift as new methods, technology, and interpretations emerge. Genealogy, on the other hand, is rooted in documentation, names, records, and connections that do not change. And I know some of y'all will get mad at me for saying this, but I want to make it clear I'm not defending the natives. And as a matter of fact, I think the hate that they get is actually warranted, right? But I know we have seen the studies that say that natives come from Siberians. And if you look at their cultural practices, you can definitely see the similarities. However, I'm not going to use that as the basis of their identity. Why? Because biologically and by tracing their paper documentation, modern day natives are heavily mixed with Europeans, European Americans at that. And that's not opinion. There are several studies, not just like, I'm not talking about scientific studies, I'm talking about like Pew Research, talking about how white natives are the largest multiracial group in the United States. You can actually trace that in records, in parents, in lineages. That's facts that you can touch, see, and verify. And I want to like bring this to y'all attention too. What if scientists, right, was to be like, oh, hold on, y'all. Anyway, like I was saying, so what happens if tomorrow scientists change their stance and say, actually, modern natives don't descend from Siberians? We were wrong. Where does that leave you? Where would that leave you? Hmm? Where would that leave you if your entire argument is built on their word? And these scientists and anthropologists and archaeologists, their stances on their findings change periodically. That's why I don't use scientific studies anymore. And I actually talked about this in my book, Discovering American Genealogy, because having us look at scientific studies as a basis of identity is a distraction. And, we don't really know like their agenda like that. I used to get heavily into it. I'm like, yeah, this scientist said this and this scientist said that, but it's like I'm not there to confirm or deny that. We have to think, we have to use our noggin and be like, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to take it to heart because you can change your stance at any minute. Because at the end of the day, reservations are not governed by anthropologists. Basing your entire stance on shifting research is not only unstable, but it's dangerous. Blood, memory, and genealogy are the only foundations that stand. And for a moment, I want to talk about the danger of replacing memory work with studies. When you use scientific studies as the foundation of your ancestry, you are stepping into categories that were never designed to hold the fullness of your lineage. The labels used in scientific studies aren't timeless. They shift depending on the methods and the assumptions of the researchers. We just seen that with Lucia. Helito, welcome in, George. So we see them use Australoid, Melanesian, Australoid, and all these other terms, right? We see that throughout these scientific studies, but that's not really embodying the real identity and culture of those people. If you tie your identity to those shifting labels, you're building your foundation on quicksand. Studies are designed to capture populations, not families. They trace markers across continents, migration routes, and genetic clusters. But what they cannot do is follow your people through the names, marriages, births, and land records that make lineage a whole. Hey, welcome in. Welcome in. Welcome to the chat. Also, this is what I really wanted to address, okay? A study might trace a migration wave, but notice what it does in the process. It takes living nations, and ancient nations too, turns them into cold, impersonal categories like population X, haplogroup Y, cluster Z. That is identity alchemy as well. As much as people are like so anti-hipper genocide, the scientific studies definitely partake in that too. Because what do you mean population X? Those people go by names. Those people have their own identity. Our ancestors did not call themselves population samples. They had names, nations, languages, and prayers. They carried lineages and fought for them. But the moment scientists dig them up, which, by the way, it's a huge slap in the face. You know, these ancestors are supposed to be resting. Imagine your time was up tens of thousands of years ago, but then your resting ground is disturbed because someone decided to dig you up, and now you in a museum somewhere. And now you just awake because they got you in this cold room in a glass display. You're like, what the hell, man? You know? Hey, welcome engine, welcome imprints. So, like we have to think about what scientific studies do in their impact, not only on our thinking, but how they treat ancient ancestors too. Because it's not fair to them. It's not fair to them for them to be like, okay, this is my resting place. I'm good here. And then they get dug up and now like they're restless. They're like wandering spirits because their resting place has been disturbed. It has been desecrated. But like I was saying, the moment scientists dig them up, strip them of that context, and rename them with sterile labels, they are erasing the memory those ancestors carried. So I have to ask, why repeat the language of studies when those studies are not in conversation with the ancestors themselves? Why adopt labels that our people would never have chosen and which exist only because someone exhumed them for research? People are quick to call out paper genocide of laws like the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, where indigenous families were reclassified on government documents. Yet, those same voices would turn around and accept the paper genocide of scientific studies, which overwrite ancestral names with academic codes. If you claim to be indigenous, but you're basing that claim on studies that strip indigenous people of their self-identifiers, tell me, how is that not suspicious? I find that suspicious. And perhaps most important, studies can create distance from your own authority. Many people cite them not because their genealogy is weak, but because they feel pressure to defend themselves with something that sounds official. But if your genealogy is sound, it doesn't need defending. The census records, the oral histories, the family testimonies, all of those are stronger than a footnote in a scientific journal. So the question remains, if you have already traced your genealogy, why are you leaning on studies at all? The truth is uncomfortable. Many have been conditioned to believe that outside institutions know their family better than their family does. That is not just a mistake, it is the most dangerous replacement of memory work there is. Which brings me to my favorite part of this live that I want to discuss. Okay, let me get off here. So I was doing a little bit of research, y'all. When I saw this, I was like, I have to share this with y'all guys because no one else is talking about this. But of course, on my channel, we're going to talk about things that people feel uncomfortable with. And quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Okay, so you're probably like, okay, Yona, what is this, right? Okay, so this is something that shocked me. So let's go over some sources that prove why scientific studies would never trump genealogy research, okay? So in Germany, yes, you heard me right, Germany, scientists are pushing for the term race to be removed from Article 3 of the German Constitution. hmm Yeah, yeah, as you can see right here. Yeah. This came after the Jenna Declaration of 2019, where leading experts in genetics, zoology, and evolutionary biology came together to clearly say human races do not exist in biology. And here's what they laid out in simple terms. The idea of race was built by cherry picking a few surface traits like skin color, hair, or skull shape, which we already know because the whole basis of racism is just based on what you look like. And honestly, this just further proves what I've been telling y'all. Because in my last life, we was talking about like how the pale ones, right? The yeast yodelers used lookism to discriminate against people. So here it is in Germany, home of the Iran's the smaller coast, saying, you know what, we're not gonna use race anymore. And they're taking it out of the Constitution, their Constitution. And look at here, human races are not a biological reality. Mm, Let me continue, okay? But when scientists look deep into our DNA, the 3.2 billion letters of the human genome, they don't find dividing lines that separate people into races. Not a single gene defines one so called race from another. They concluded the concept of race is the result of racism, not its prerequisite. The concept of race is the result of racism, not its prerequisite. prerequisite. Hello? Let's continue. Scientific American also highlighted, this is something different, by the way. Scientific American also highlighted that racial categories are misleading and imprecise when applied to genetic diversity. Many scientists argue for phasing them out entirely. A Science Journal article underscores that race lacks biological meaning. It's tied to power, policy, and historical hierarchy, not DNA. Notice none of them say genealogy equals studies. Like I said before, I talked about this for years. This is why I say your own genealogy, your family history, is what matters the most. You cannot rely on studies done in labs by people you have never met. We don't know what their real motives are or if they are leaving out details. That's why I always take these studies with a grain of salt and approach them critically. And, I'm not like shaming anyone because I used to be like that. I used to be the person that'd be like, oh, this study said this and this scientific study said that. But, like over time, I realized no study can replace the work you do tracing your own family history, talking to your elders, and following the records that show your real ancestors. So when someone comes to me and says, but a study says the first Americans were Black, I ignore them. I don't take them seriously. A scientific study isn't your great grandmother. It isn't the names of your ancestors on an 1850 census. It isn't that ancestor marked as recolored on a land deed, but known in the community as indigenous. A scientific study about a demographic is not a replacement for genealogy research. Genealogy provides insight into something that is tailored to you. A scientific study is about populations, patterns, and probabilities. It is not tailored to your family, and it cannot prove who you are. So, here's your assignment if you're serious. Stop quoting random studies as your identity. You do not need to learn studies from scholars and anthropologists and scientists and archaeologists and whoever else talking about Black people been in the Americas prior to Columbus. It doesn't matter because it has nothing to do with you. And this is why a lot of you are in endless debates with the natives because y'all going back and forth with them and they're actually siphoning your energy because you could have used that energy researching more about your ancestors, tearing down that block, that brick wall in your genealogy research, or you could have just done, something that you wanted to do, like go outside and have fun, go out for a walk. You could have used that time that you use arguing with them to do something that you actually wanted to do. They want you to get caught up in scientific studies. They want you to get caught up in arguing about those things. Why? Because it keeps you from knowing the truth about yourself, about your family history, about where you come from. Because honestly, learning stuff that happened before 1492 doesn't really matter. Maybe it matters to someone, but it just It doesn't really matter to me because what are you going to do with that information? Oh, black people been here in America's okay. What that got to do with you? There's so many people cosplaying and acting like they are a part of the Black American demographic when they're not. Their ancestors didn't go through reclassification. They probably just got over here, and they hear people talk about reclassification and racial labels and talking about how black people been over here. They're like, oh, let me hop on that. No, this is why I don't have a problem being called Indian, even though the concept of race isn't a prerequisite. It's not the truth. However, on paper, we know that the indigenous people were labeled as Indian or Indios. And sure, we know that indigenous people went through reclassification and was reclassified as black, colored, Negro, etc. But people are forgetting, like, when we went from being called an Indian to black, like, we lost not only status, but we also lost land. And when you go through reclassification, it kind of like blocks you from really like practicing the ways of your ancestors. Because think about it, there are indigenous people that took on the label black, and they did it because they were trying to hide. They knew like it was a dangerous time to be known as Indian. Like, oh, you're Indian, okay? We're gonna pull up on your land, and we're gonna take it, and whoever you related to, we're gonna sell them off into slavery. So some indigenous people, they was like, you know what, I'm just gonna call myself black and avoid all that. Not to say like people of the black demographic wasn't going through that either, but that's just how reclassification goes. Being called Indian isn't the correct term either. But when you are called Indian, or should I say American Indian to be more specific, people know like, oh, okay, you're of this land. So I don't understand why y'all are coming to my channel to say this, because this doesn't make any sense. Scientific studies are broad, shifting, and also political. It's important for people to map their bloodlines, names, locations, records, oral testimonies. That's where your true restoration begins. Because at the end of the day, no one can argue with your family's receipts. They can argue with studies, though, but they can't argue with your great grandmother's birth certificate or or the oral history passed down in your family for 200 years. So when someone tells me I need to do more research and look into scientific studies, I tune them out because I know what I have done. I have researched my family's ancestry from generation to generation as far back as I could. So, like, people can keep their if all you have is scientific studies as a basis of your identity, I feel sorry for you. You are letting people mislead you. I don't want to hear nothing about what study this person said or what study you came across. I don't care. If you can't even tell me who your third great grandmother is, I'm not even going to take you seriously. How you know what everybody has to say about a scientific study, but you don't even know your own family bloodline. You don't know what nation you come from. You don't know any family lore. People are not even trying to learn the languages of their ancestors. And I just find that suspicious. Because the point of doing genealogy research is to really reconnect with your roots. And by reconnecting, maybe it will joggle your memory and teach you that you have already practiced the ways of your ancestors. And if not, get in tune with that. I don't want to hear about no damn scientific study because what does that have to do with you? Did they use you as the basis of the population that they're testing on? Anyway, y'all, I'm about to log off because it's late and I said what I had to say. So if you are still trying to use scientific studies as a basis of your identity, you're pathetic and you need to grow up. Be an adult and do the research of your bloodline, or otherwise be quiet. I don't want to hear nothing about no study. And you know what's so funny? While I'm talking mess, right? It's crazy how people will post this in my comment section, right? Talking about all these studies and you know these scientific studies they come across and how they think it's factual and stuff. But when it comes to statistics of their demographic or whatever, right? Then people will be like, ah, no, it's lies. The statistics are lies. It's like how you don't value statistics, but you value studies. Because neither one of them you have really researched yourself, like because you can't really use one thing without verifying with other methods, right? Because when I say, hey, there are, studies saying that the largest multiracial group in the United States is white natives. We can see that in genealogy records. We can see that on these reservations. You know, we can see that with birth certificates. We can see that with the enrollments. Like, there are so many sources verifying that. But how many sources can you use to verify a scientific study when pretty much a very small amount of people have access to the research itself? I'm gonna let y'all think on that. Y'all have a good night, y'all.